am your host, Jesse Schwartz, Strategic Packaging Partners, and we have Eric here. He's our EPR industry expert, keeping track of everything that's going on, which I'm sure is a full-time job. All right, so we're going to talk source reduction today, what it is, explain more about it, talk through some of the questions that we're getting as we're helping brand owners work through this. And we're going to present a deck, and it's going to violate like every corporate law against the rules of how you do a deck. It's going to be really wordy, but the idea is that it's also a tool for you to reflect on. We'll send it out after this, so you can kind of dig through it a little bit. You can always come to us for your questions, and we'll make this productive for you guys. All right. Okay, so the 5 pathways to source reduction. This is applying specifically to California. They are looking to overall reduce the packaging that is going into the state. As a reminder, we have really 2 laws going on there, State Bill 54 and State Bill 343. You probably hear a lot about those. State Bill 343 is more around truth in labeling and the chasing arrows, which we're not covering today. But this is a slide for you to reference. And then SB 54 is really what we're focusing on here. And it goes along with EPR. So you're gathering all your data. As a responsible producer, you are registering with a CAA. You've submitted your data. And now the next deadline looming is August 1st of this year to submit your source reduction plan. Again, that is getting California closer to overall reducing the amount of plastic going into the state. And they are using data from 2023 as a baseline. So you'll want to remember that, because that's the baseline, regardless of how much more product you sell in the state. So
yeah, that's a key point, Jesse. And I mean, it just, I guess for everyone joining the call, I mean, the thing I've been learning really around this is, think of it as like I've been telling brand owners, like, congratulations, you made the May 31st deadline. You're able to get your data in for 2025. But a lot of companies were really facing this pain point of, they're like, wait a minute, I was supposed to submit my data for 2023 as well. And yeah, that was absolutely true, because that baseline of 2023 is how companies are going to be measured against for their source reduction strategies going forward, which is a little confusing, right? Because some people, what happened to 2024? And they're like, no, you don't have to. It's a hall pass. But they are using the 2023 data, just to clarify, to interject, because that's how the Circular Action Alliance has worked with the state of California, CalRecycle, and said, look, that's the baseline. That's how we're going to measure and manage every company's performance going forward. So with source reduction, it really is it's this added ask, right? It's almost, if anybody's watching PPWR in Europe, there's a lot more depth to the EPR programs there, along with the regulatory compliance. So what I've been experiencing, Jesse, and I don't know if you've heard this, but like, more companies are simply, they're feeling the regulatory pressure. That's kind of what we talk about in the food and beverage industry, where a lot of companies they're feeling the pressure of like, oh, I don't just have to report my data and weights and sales volume. They're like, no, now you got to do this additional thing, which is source reduction, which is, again, focusing on how to do a diagnostic of their impact, what they put into the marketplace in 2023. Yeah. And then the next layer right behind that is the individual source reduction plan, which is now this looming deadline of August 1st. Which is like, okay, great. You've made this commitment. You've looked at where you can improve, but now it's a how. How are you going to reduce this, right? At least that's the way I've interpreted the law.
Yes. And they've come up with the 5 ways, which we'll get to in a minute. But the idea is using less, measuring it, and then making it work for your organization. And I think one important thing too is that it's kind of level setting with the 5 ways to do source reduction, because there's a lot of different components to having a brand and be on the shelf and be recognizable, and in the banner that you have and things like that. And they're creating kind of a level playing field of like, everyone has to do something. So how do we collectively think about packaging differently? So essentially, August 1st is the deadline to submit your ISRP, individual source reduction plan. And the goal is to get you to 25% less single-use plastic by January 1st of 2032, again with that baseline of 2023. And we're going to talk about two different ways to kind of add up to your percentage. One is reducing plastic, like the grams or the kilograms of plastic going into the state. But another way is also to reduce plastic components. So if you have multiple plastic components, source reduction includes, getting rid of one of those components, which may not be very heavy, may not be like a large percentage of the plastic going into the state, but it's a component reduction, which is kind of, it's kind of considered differently, right? Like,
yeah, no, it's absolutely different. I mean, again, that's in the uniqueness of the EPR reports that everyone should have submitted or have submitted. The aspect is really, okay, the question should be asked, like brand owners should be thinking about, like, why are they asking for the number of components? Like that's the key question. That's a precursor to what the source reduction element of State Bill 54 is asking brand owners to comply with. Mm-hmm. So along with reporting, which is their bar tab, right? Like I imported X amount of packaging, into the state of California. Great, you'll get your bar tab at the end later this fall in August as well. The state of California is going to invoice you for that. The other element of that was the ask, right? The ask was like, well, how many plastic components do you have? And can you break that down? And the reason for that is now they're trying to set you up for success to do the next layer, right? Which is the source reduction component. And with that, there was also, just so everybody knows, on May 31st, there was that ASR, that essentially the annual source reduction. It's more of a, you've looked at your packaging portfolio, you understand it has a footprint, and you have been thinking about the reduction progress you've already made potentially or intend to make. The difference now is screaming ahead and due in 36 days is the individual source reduction plan, which again, it's the ask there for producers is like, okay, I've given you my footprint. I've told you what we put in the marketplace by 2023. I understand my 2025 data as well, what plus or minus, like what, even though our sales have gotten up or maybe sales have gone down, unfortunately, but the amount of material you put in the state still matters. Because now the ask is going to be, what's required is that you now are you're putting your business on a path to meet California's very aggressive 2027 to 2032 mandates. And the mandates, again, are the elements of kind of like what's on here, right? This is what California is trying to strive for. This is what Circular Action Alliance has partnered with Cal Recycle to say, okay, we hear you loud and clear, California. We understand you have a waste management problem, or at least an importation problem. What are you going to do with all this stuff? The goal is still the same, right? EPR fees help build up the infrastructure, right? To make sure everything can be get those things to be more widely recyclable. Yes. And the things that don't have the highest price tag, right? Have the higher fee and tax on things that aren't widely recyclable, things that aren't curbside recyclable, things that aren't compostable by definition. And so the goal here really, and again, California is unique in this, and it's not just in the US. California has what might be one of the most aggressive and aspirational, for better adjective, around trying to really move the needle, right? As far as making brand owners and producers more responsible in the choices of the packaging design that they make before, as they put things on the marketplace. Like that's really the name of the game here. Just a lot of people are like, well, Eric, tell me more. Like why is California doing this? Do they just like making everybody's life difficult? Or like, no, like it's really around, they have a waste problem, right? Like they're a huge economy. There's, what, 30, I know a lot of people have left California recently, but like there's still like tens of millions of people living there. And the reality is they still have these aggressive goals. And so the source reduction is kind of, if you think about it, again, using the Simon Sinek, the golden circle, it's how are you going to be able to change your packaging and redesign it in the next few years so that, yes, California wants to reduce your plastic, the number of plastic components. And the reason for that is that can you simplify your packaging solutions? I always use the acronym ASAP, just everybody, it's a freebie. I always call it, it's called as simple as possible, right? Can you make your packaging design ASAP, as simple as possible, so that it can be fully recovered, right? So can you do the same solution but take out an element, right? And so with that, I think maybe what would help everybody on the call, Jesse, is maybe to talk about the 5 pathways a little bit more.
Yes.
Because that's the strategy that California is putting in place.
Yes, absolutely.
Like this is the box top reference guide, right? Of like what you need to do to think about how do I engineer this, yeah?
And I'm sensitive that a lot of brands look at these numbers, especially in food and beverage, and say, well, there's no possible way I'm using so much material that I could reduce it by as much as California wants me to. And that can be kind of a scary thing. I think what's important to understand as we go through these 5 ways is like, could you come up with a plan based on your EPR data? You look at it like 10% less, right? Like the January 2027, could you get to a 10% less? What's realistic or reasonable there? And then
be careful, because it's not could you, it's you must. The mandate is that you have
you must. Good
like,
call.
I would clarify that.
Right? I think that came to mind because I'm also thinking of brands that are like, we are actually selling more in the state now than we ever did in 2023. So how do we do source reduction based on a 2023 number if our volumes are increasing? That's the crux
of the legislation that I think the brands that have kind of like gone deep, like on selling, like, okay, I know what I'm reporting, I'm involved, I want to be part of the solution, I don't want to be part of the problem.
Yes.
The Houston, we have a problem, or maybe it's Sacramento, we have a problem, is my company, we're projecting our sales now for the next 5 years, overlaying to get to 2030, 2032. Yep. And these companies have growth. Like that's their ambition, right? Like they're like, yes, we want to get our brand out there. We want to sell more of our stuff and our amazing product. But the rules of the game have changed under this law. And that is, again, even if your sales grows, what the source reduction baseline is saying is that you're only allowed to use what you have established and reported out on 2023.
Yes.
Look, I've been doing packaging design for 31 years. That is the crux of what every pain point that these companies are going to have. They're like, well, wait a minute, Eric. Like we project that we're going to sell more snacks, or we're going to sell more hardware solutions, or whatever it is. And they're like, that's great. But as you grow, you essentially have a budget. It's almost like a salary cap of how much material that you can use. The overlay of the legislation is the 5 pathways. So I'm not saying I can tell you exactly what to do, but the reality is, like, this is where your company needs to start looking at the pathways and understanding, okay, of the 5, it's a process of elimination, right? Like you're just essentially doing a self-audit. Can I do this? Yes. Is it the area where I can get can I get there? Can I get to achieve to those levels that the state is requiring me to do? And again, that's the lens that I'm hoping all companies need to figure that out. And now, again, I was talking with a client or a brand owner, was it late last week, Jesse? And the reality was, they're like, wait a minute, we're anticipating we're going to sell more. And I'm like, I get that. They're like, how are we going to do this? I'm like, we're going to have to engineer the heck out of this, right? Like the reality is you're living across the line using substrates that California can't recycle or there's no infrastructure for.
Right.
So they ask is now you have to pivot and redesign your packaging. And they're asking you to do it incrementally over time. And what I've told every packaging engineer out there, and I'm like, look, you know this. I did this a long time ago. I was a packaging engineer, much younger version of me. But like the reality is, like, you've got to think about it as you're going to touch your packaging design one way or another. Can you do it once versus doing it multiple times? Like that's the risk that any packaging engineer. If it makes sense to engineer it forward and do it as an evolution and take steps, that's one way to do it. the more economical way to do it is to look at your program today. What are the low-hanging fruit? What are the things that I can do in one touch, one redesign? And that's kind of, again, at least have that strategy going into how am I going to do this in the next 5 years? And again, the pathways here that you presented are kind of like, this is the box top. This is how does California want to put the pieces together?
Yeah. Okay. So the 5, I'll just say them and then we'll just talk through each one of them. Eliminate, right? Removing components that don't need to be there. Right sizing, so reducing the head space and unusable space. That's pretty straightforward. Lightweighting, down gauging, optimizing structures. That's, using less material. Reuse and refill. So that's kind of a big one, a big deal for most companies. Like they're like, I don't even know, I can't touch that one. Like, okay, fine. Or shifting the format. Those are the 5 pathways.
It's swapping it out. Yeah. So maybe go back to that. This slide is really important. I kind of want to, if it's okay, I'd like to talk about it a little bit, Jesse, because the reality is like, look, eliminate, right? Eliminate. What can you eliminate? What's like, let's just be honest. Like, what did your marketing team ask you to add to your packaging design that you really didn't need? Is there a way that you can, again, ASAP, can you do this? Can you protect your product in transit? Can you put that product on shelf and still maintain the product shelf life, or whatever it is? Maybe it's strawberries, maybe it's a box of hardwood nails that you buy at Ace Hardware, whatever it is, right? Can you do that and just eliminate a component, or can you eliminate a substrate, some sort of design, some part of your packaging design? Again, simplify it, right? And the elimination thing is also very close related to the reuse and refill. So if you look into the law, if the source reduction requirement is that you try to get to that 25% reduction goal. Now, you've got them 1 through 5, but I do want to call out that reuse, refill, and elimination combined is one aspect of getting to 25%, meaning that only 10% of your pathway achievement to getting to the 25% can be those 2 aspects. The other 15% is the other 3 pathways of, again, right sizing and lightweighting and swapping out one material for another. Because California's like, you can't just do one of the 5 and call it a day. That's why I want to be crystal clear.
Okay, it has to be.
You actually have to look at the 25% goal total is split 10 and 15%. 10% is reuse, refill, elimination. 15% is everything else. So again, everybody on the call, just know that like there's rules of the game here, right? You can't just say, I'm going to put all this post-consumer content into the mix and wipe my hands and call it a day. No, California actually wants you to work harder against more of these. Now, recycled content is certainly an aspect, and that's certainly something that the shift format, right, that they absolutely want you to do.
Okay, so when you think about creating your plan, most companies have talked about 100 different types of projects. There's a lot of knowledge on what they've evaluated in the past, maybe some options and reasons why they didn't work out. Some of those reasons are we just didn't have the time, money, or resources to go after an idea. So a lot of companies have evaluated ideas in one of these 5 categories in the past for whatever reason.
Usually that reason is like you got some sourcing manager going like, look, we got to drive out cost. I need a productivity measurement, right? Like always looking at how you can simplify your packaging spend using the traditional aspect of right sizing, right? Like I remember way back in the day when I worked at Nestle in Bakersfield, California, we actually walked around the entire operational floor. We looked at every single product, all of our manufacturing in that Bakersfield ice cream plant, and literally walked away with like, 300 areas of opportunity, little things that we could do to lightweight, to right size, can we eliminate? But the name of the game then was cost takeout, right? It was like, how do I take out cost? Because of ever rising cost of materials or operational overhead or whatever it is, or simplify it. So again, just you're making your operations run smoother. Now it's cost takeout and it's regulatory risk. Like the regulatory requirement is like, oh, by the way, you legally now have to do this for state of California. And you have to have the blueprint and the plan and the evidence and the documentation that you are doing this. So think of it as like not an internal campaign. Now it's an external campaign that you actually have to submit to CAA, who then submits it to California to make sure you're in compliance. So that's the huge shift, right? A lot of companies, again, the smart companies are always looking at areas of improvement.
Yeah.
Now the source reduction is the law.
And to track it, right?
Great job. Thanks for being somebody. Now you got to do this because it's the law. That's a huge mindset shift for a lot of regulatory teams, packaging engineers, and sourcing people.
And let's say people did a project last year. Can they count it for their source reduction?
You can. And again, let's say you were able to do one of these things and you want to get credit. Like that's where the source reduction strategy and EPR that's where they blend a little bit, right? So one is there's the source reduction requirement for reporting out on your progress and doing it because that's the requirement. The other aspect of it is the bonus and malus, right? Like if you make that change, you're going to reduce and you can prove it and you got the evidence, you can then submit your EPR report the next year going, hey, we made this product went from this format to this other one.
Yeah.
And we want to get credit, thus reduce your fees. So then you can check both boxes, which is ideal. You're able to say, we're reducing our materials and impact, our footprint. Yeah. And oh, by the way, we want to reduce our taxes because we made that change, right? So in California, it's going to be like, great, keep it up. Can you get to the 25%, right, target with your single-use plastic if you have single-use plastic within your repertoire of your assortment?
Yeah. So like companies go through stages with their projects, right? They have like ideation, feasibility, development. Okay. So a lot of kind of back to earlier, a lot of companies will have kind of this ideation phase, a bunch of projects that never moved forward for a variety of reasons.
Dust all those off, take those all off the shelf, right? Like, totally.
So then for the source reduction plan, are you seeing companies kind of dust off old ideas and saying, we don't know if we can technically do this because we just have these ideas in an ideation phase. Can people put those ideas into a source reduction plan, knowing that, they'll have to make sure they can do it and still protect the product and, not cause more issues like a bunch of damaged product or product that becomes part of a waste stream and other reasons? How do you think, how are people doing these plans when, they don't have?
No, the way I would think about it, right, is think about it as like, okay, like everybody just submitted all their data back on May 31st, and hopefully they passed out on the 1st, took a nap, had a beverage of choice, got through that pain point, and now they're like, oh, now I got to focus on this next task, which is source reduction. So what that is to take your data and start analyzing it, right? Going deeper, like what does the data reveal about your program? Yeah. And you then need to overlay the elements of State Bill 54 source reduction. Meaning like, okay, this is what the state of California wants you to do, right? And how you do that is essentially your baseline for 2023. You think about where you were then and where you are, what you just reported on 2025, where your company is growing to a certain degree. Now you need devil's in the details. Now you need to look at each and every substrate, each and every form factor, how you manufacture your products. Again, in the food and beverage world, it's very complex where it's like there's a lot of heavy automation, right? And so you may be looking and going, okay, first step, we can add recycled content in. Very easy to do. The unique thing about that is then the sourcing team is going to be like, oh, I'm going to go get boxes and I'm going to go, should I just ramp it up to 100%? Be careful. It may not be the ideal scenario for you, right? Like in some cases, maybe 100% recycled content makes sense. But are then you sacrificing the ideal, which is making a box or a folding carton, lightweighting it in a way where it's like, well, if I use 75% virgin material and 25% post-consumer material, I may be able to get an ideal, stacking strength, compression strength. Like that may be the sweet spot for that packaging component. That's where I think the packaging engineers out there at any company are going to be the chosen ones. they know what to do. They can
Yep.
see the packaging solutions. And now, instead of kind of waiting and going, well, they want us to do a productivity opportunity, it's like, no, now we have to do this. We have to engineer our packaging and heavily scrutinize it.
Well, yeah, definitely.
And I would say, if you're the strategy again is look high level, come 45,000 foot view, look at your data. What's cost? What is your breakdown of materials? Like, I was working with a snack company recently, and they know that they got a flow wrap problem, right? Like, they're like, dude, we use flexible plastic, flexible film to package all of our snacks. And the reality is, they're like, oh, not only is that the highest component cost for EPR, that's the biggest area of focus for our company then to re-engineer. So now they know where to focus, going like, okay, if we work on this one component, or we work on, if they've got a category assortment, they're like, of everything we make, this one category is the one that's most packaging intensive. If I work on that one category in the next year or two, that's going to get us to the resource reduction strategy. And then just kind of put the blocker on everything else and just focus on the areas where it's low hang. I don't like to use the term low hanging fruit.
Well, biggest lakes for opportunity, right?
Yeah, like of your data lake, data lake.
Yeah.
Like, you're looking at your data, like where can I find resource reduction? And again, that can come into, obviously start with single use plastic, but look at everything else, because it could be a combination, right? Like, you could say, look, we want to do this one thing. Maybe it is this shift format, swapping out one substrate for another. And the math equation is, okay, you may go from that flexible film to that flexible paper with some barrier property, right? To maintain shelf life of your product, so your pretzels don't get all soggy, right? Sitting on the shelf. But the reality is, there's going to be a cost to making that change. On the back end now, there's a cost to putting your product in the marketplace now because of EPR. So that's that financial footprint, right? Of like looking at it, what does it cost you to source the material and apply it to your product, to package it and ship it and put it in a warehouse and distribute it? What's it going to cost you on the back end? You need to start looking at those numbers, because a sourcing team traditionally was like, I'm going to buy flexible film because it works and it's cheap and it's effective. And now it's like, okay, that's great on the front end, but now on the back end, we're going to get dinged on the EPR fees, and we have to reduce our source reduction. So now we got to retroactively go back and saying, okay, is that the right material? Yes or no? And if it is, great, maintain it. But then do the things of like, well, can you right size it? Can you add recycled content? Can you lightweight the gauge a little bit? Those are now all the engineering things. That's where you need to call up your packaging engineer, take them out to lunch.
That's
ask them, like, they're like Eric Jr. Back in the day, like, what should we do? Like, the sourcing team needs to lean in hard on their packaging engineers now, because that's their core job and that's what they love to do, right? Like, they're an engineer by a reason, right? So let them engineer this forward. And again, that's kind of what I recommend to any company now, to kind of think about that.
Absolutely. And we have some questions coming in. We'll be sure to get to those after the fact. We can post answers right in LinkedIn, but we'll send this deck out too, and it has each of the pathways to source reduction kind of in more detail. And after this, if anyone on the call is saying, gosh, I really wish I had some help with this because this is really confusing and I don't want to mess it up, we are going to be offering a workshop called the Source Reduction Readiness Workshop, where we can help you. It's a 90-minute working session with your team, and we can sit down with you guys. We'll send you some pre-work where you can kind of fill out where you guys are at with things. Because let's be honest, some producers haven't even reported yet. Like, just where are you? Do you have your data? Have you mapped it out? Because we want to give like the right assistance, right? Are we at a 101 level or are we graduate level, right? Because we know this is really confusing, and based on all the questions that we're getting, we think it's a way that we could really help. And again, if you guys have questions, just post it here, or you could message either one of us. We're here to help you with your source reduction plan. And we thank you for joining us today and hope you have a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.